and I can't really deal with it now, so we just tell you have to trust that everybody's here. Sorry.
Scott,
I'm Monica.
please.
We have, it's recorded.
Oh, okay.
We have prayed for a friend of Jean's named Monica. Over time, she is really, really battling with this cancer. And she has a family that she has to take care of, and it's been hard. And she sort of disappeared. He wasn't hearing from her, and we get concerned. It's what we do. He heard from her this week, and actually, she says it was not anything new about her health. The family dog died. She felt really bad for her children. When we get in those circumstances like she's in, we get overwhelmed. And there is a human trait that sometimes we tend to withdraw from those things. I don't think we're better off for doing it, but I certainly don't judge anybody for doing it because it's just very human. But he heard from her. She's doing as well as she was before. Is that fair, Gene?
Yes, sir.
With the cancer. But the good news is that we at least we know. Anything else?
No.
God, we come to you in awe, the maker of the universe, the maker of us. We understand that we overlook the amazing things around us so often. And we're thankful when we do manage to catch a glimpse of the wonder of this place. We're thankful for your hand on it, for your presence with these people that we bring in prayer. We hear often that they experience that, and we're thankful for that as well. We're always thankful for the words that you inspired, the things that you've given us as guideposts. Give us the wisdom and the heart to understand them. Amen.
Okay, we are in week 8 of Genesis, and last week we got through chapter 12, and we're going to start in chapter 13. But we always do a little bit of reset. And do you want to pull up the map? I guess I can pull up the map. There. And here, I'll let you do it.
I think that's wise. Step through these. There you go.
Okay.
Can you all see that? Any head nods? Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, so that's either way. This is the path when we've been reading this about Abraham. He was Abram at that time. The movement, he starts in Ur. If you look at the right side of the screen where that arrow is, that's Ur. That's where he began. And you notice that the straight line to Israel would have been a lot shorter. But in between there, as I said last week, there are mountains, but there's also a section of the Arabian desert, not a path that people took if they don't know what they're doing there. So he goes up to the place known as Haran. They sort of settle in there until his father dies. And then he gets the message, you need to get back at what you're doing. They go down into modern day Israel, which is over here. We heard those names, Shechem, Bethel. And then because there's a famine, this seems to be a common thing, they run off to Egypt. Egypt down here has the Nile and the Nile Delta, and it stays fertile. They wind up with food when other people have drought and famine. They stay there for a while, and you know the story about him telling that that his wife was really his sister. When he leaves, because of that encounter, he leaves with more wealth than he had before. Wealth is measured in, well, 3 things if you get technical: livestock, servants in the household, having a large household that you can get a lot done, and family, because they want to leave that lineage behind. And so he leaves with two of the three. He leaves with a lot more livestock and some more people in his entourage. So he leaves wealthier than he came, and they come right back up here to this area around Bethel, Hebron, etc. And we'll come back to this as we talk about what happens today.
Yeah, but we're going to talk a little bit about
Well, I'll go ahead and do it. Let's take that off. Let's stop share. So Mary touched on the word tov, and so much of what's in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew especially, we miss. There's so much wonder there. And we're told that Abram comes from Ur of the Chaldeans. Those of you who grew up in churches, probably nobody ever told you who Chaldeans were. And there's a group of people from Chaldea, and at the simplest form, that's all it is. But that's not what's going on here. The Chaldeans have a reputation for having, these people who they're wise, they're knowledgeable, they are seers, they read the stars, they're astrologers, but they have collected knowledge from all over the world, and they're renowned for it. And they become kingmakers. They become, they will have people who advise a person, and he becomes a king because of their help, their knowledge. And then often they leave people behind in the court of the king. They become his advisor. They're very, very powerful. I don't want to call them shadowy, but they work mostly behind the scenes. So we flash forward to the time of Daniel. And if you remember, the Jews have been hauled off into exile. Where? In Babylon. The Chaldees is in Babylonia. That's where it is. Well, Nebuchadnezzar has risen as this powerful king, and we're told that Daniel reveals his dream. And Nebuchadnezzar is very impressed, but he puts Daniel into the Chaldeans, the wise men, because they actually finds out he's better at it than any of them. And Daniel becomes part of this group of Chaldeans, right? Flash forward, this is 1400 years, by the way. Abram comes from Ur of the Chaldeans. 1400 years later, Daniel goes into the company of these Chaldeans. Flash forward another 600 years, a star appears in the sky, and wise men from the east come because they know the prophecies of the Messiah. How would they know the prophecies of the Messiah? They're Chaldeans, and Daniel brought them with him. Daniel knew the prophecies, and I think it's just unquestionable that those prophecies get brought into their knowledge by Daniel. Do you see a very long plan unfolding here?
So Genesis 11:25 is the first time we hear about Ur of the Chaldeans, and that's in 2000 BC. Daniel is in 600 BC, and then Jesus is born, and the wise men come to see him.
So in Daniel, they talk about these people as astrologers, but if you read the Hebrew word, it's the word that means Chaldeans. And the people, the wise men who come from the east, are referred to as magi. The original is magoi, but that's where we get our word magic, because they knew how to do these things, right? And people thought, oh, it's magic. And the overlap between Chaldeans and Magi is sort of a specialty within Chaldeans, but they come from the same place. These ones who come from the east, the Magi, I don't have any doubt. I don't have any question that prophecy was brought in by Daniel being taken into captivity in Babylon, and he teaches them, and they're looking for the arrival of this prophecy, this magi, and this whole thing ties everything together, as we see so often. These stories are not told in are these histories, but what's going on here, this plan, nothing happens in a vacuum. There's a long plan here, and it's amazing when you understand what really has unfolded.
Well, and that's the final point, that this book, we believe it's the inspired word of God, and it's written by a whole bunch of different people. And yet this story of Ur of the Chaldeans, this location runs from Genesis to Daniel to Jesus. And if you don't study the Bible this way, you miss that too. And it's just so amazing. Anyhow, that's our amazing story today.
Well, and I got to comment on it because my shallow study of these chapters as we're going, sometimes it's difficult to follow it and understand. But by the time we get to Daniel and then backtrack, and I think these Bibles should have a little footnotes, because it leaves us out there. And I thought it's a tremendous summary, by the way. But we miss a lot of that. Yeah. And in the language itself, we have the same sort of thing in English, but when we're educated, we want to read that one word means one thing.
That's right.
And we're off the track here when we're trying to read this book.
It's worth taking a few minutes to comment on that, Gene. The Hebrew, as Mary said, there's so few, the words tend to be more rich. We've learned that the word shalom means peace, but it means so much more than that. And part of it has to do with prosperity, because when there's peace, prosperity comes with it. But it's a word that's loaded, and we miss that. And what has not happened in the organized Western churches is we go and hear sermons, and sermons are little homilies for today. There's a message that the person wants to get across, and they just pick and choose and stuff it at you, and you don't get to. And you're right, it should have footnotes. It would be very complicated to put that many footnotes in. But that's what I've been trying to do here. When I make a big deal out of a word, it's because my hope is that if you understand the richness behind the word, all of a sudden it's much easier to say, oh, well, now I understand. And your people's faith, I think, is strengthened by a better understanding. This is one of those times. Or the Chaldeans, the place where Abram comes from, figures prominently in what comes after that, all the way up to the birth of Jesus.
Okay, Genesis 13. So Abram went up out of Egypt into the Negev, he and his wife and all his possessions, and Lot was with him. And Abram had become extremely wealthy in livestock and silver and gold. From the Negev, he journeyed from place to place towards Bethel until he came to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had formerly been pitched, to the site where he had built the altar. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land was unable to support both of them while they stayed together, for they had so many possessions, and they were unable to coexist. And there was discord between the herdsmen of Abram and the herdsmen of Lot. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land. So Abram said to Lot, please let there be no contention between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen. After all, we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Now separate yourself from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. And Lot looked out and saw the whole plain of the Jordan, all the way to Zoar, and well was well watered like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose the whole plain of the Jordan for himself and set out towards the east. And Abram and Lot parted companies. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, but Lot settled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent towards Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked, sinning greatly against the Lord.
So they have amassed a lot of livestock. They get back up into that area where they've been before. And you notice it says that Abram called upon the name of the Lord. We saw this further back in Genesis, where there's this one little sentence that says, and it was here then that people begin to call upon the name of the Lord. This is worship, nothing more, intricate than that. But Abram gets back, he's built an altar there, and he worships Yahweh at that time. But it says that they have so much livestock, and there are other people living here at the time. This is not lush landscape. And so there's just not enough forage to support all the livestock. And it begins to cause fights between their herdsmen. Did we have a chair break or something?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, don't.
Well, those are not, they're not real sturdy. I'm sorry. So there's not enough, and the herdsmen begin to fight with each other because they're all trying to look out for their cattle. And Abram sees it. Remember that Lot is his nephew. As the elder, as the one with the greater wealth, as the one with the birthright at this point, Abram has the right to say, you need to move off. You need to give us some room. And instead of that, what he says is, this is a beautiful thing, the way he does it. He says, look, you can see there's just not enough grass here. We can't both be in this place. I'm going to give you your choice. You pick where you want to go, and I'll go the other direction. And it speaks loads about Abram and about the reason why he's selected for the role he winds up playing. This is subtle, but it's not something that should be missed. I mean, it's a thing that he says, I'm going to let you pick the best place, and I'll take second best. And it's so cool. Lot looks around, and that's what Lot does. He says, oh my goodness, this area over here, where we wind up knowing Sodom and Gomorrah is lush. I'm going to the good grass. And he leaves Abram to stay in the less desirable place. What this area is that he goes to is the tip end, the bottom end of what you would know as the Dead Sea. It's the end of the Jordan River's run, but there's underground water, and this area at this time is pretty lush. The other thing that is worth noting is it says that the people in the area Lot goes to are wicked, sinful people. Can I show one more map? I think it's worth.
Mary, you're getting good.
She is.
Don't jinx me.
And now we have to go back. No, we don't. We go this way. Okay, I'm just going to take a minute for this. This is a map of where the tribes of Israel settled. And if you can see the red cursor, this white area down here, that's the Dead Sea, right? And right down here at the end of the Dead Sea and up in this area is where Lot goes. That's where Sodom and Gomorrah were. The Galilee is up here. The Dead Sea is down here. But I want you to notice, well, first of all, when they come back from Egypt, they're supposed to all go into...
This is Moses.
Moses,
Yeah.
The Israelites, they're supposed to go over here to the west side of the Jordan. But these tribes, Reuben, Gad, and part of Manasseh, say, hey, we like it over here, right? They had been warned. They had been told not to intermingle with the Moabites. You notice that this area down here says Moab? They had been told, don't intermingle with these people. Why? We're told way back here, they are wicked, sinful people. I mean, they have some really bad habits. And 3 of the tribes, 2.5, liked it. And they said, we're just going to stay over here. And they were given permission. They said, you have to come help us fight in the promised land. But when you do, you can go back. And those 3 tribes disappear forever. We just don't, you just don't hear about them. They sort of blend into the Moabite landscape and they just fade from importance. I'm not saying that they all died off. They blended in with the Moabites and it caused some problems. Moab is the area that Lot goes to. That's what he moved into. And of course, everybody knows the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, but that becomes important. This is the fertile land that Lot chose, but it's full of some pretty wicked people.
And I just want to say one other thing. Remember last week, this was a wonderful act that Abram did right now by giving his nephew the choice of where to settle. We just finished a story where he lied to the Egyptian Pharaoh and said, Sarai is my sister, not my wife. That was not his proudest moment. So you've got to remember these people in the Old Testament that we, like Abraham, that we say, we put him up as a righteous man. He's not a saint. He does some wonderful things, but he also does some questionable things.
God uses humans.
Yeah.
And the message here, if I can sermonize just a little bit, I run into so many people who think I'm not worthy. Well, guess what? You're not. Neither am I. We're not worthy. We do human things. God uses humans, and some of them, I guess, are suited for a bigger part in things, but we all have a part.
I certainly understand the word uses humans, but he does for the plan. It's his everlasting plan from beginning to end, that the way he channels that energy to go into what he wants him to do, sometimes good, sometimes not so good.
He doesn't make us sock puppets. And that's why he didn't tell, Abram what he did, saying that Sarah is his sister. He doesn't reach down and say, here, I'm not going to let you do that, right? We're not sock puppets. And when I say uses, people who choose to follow his will, he does use. And my point is simply this: the plan you described, Gene, we are part of. Some people have they do grand things. I was made for small things, but we have the ability to do those small things. He uses people that are human, that are imperfect. And here we see one of the patriarchs doing a thing, but he's used in an enormous way. It applies to us.
Chapter 13, verse 14. After Lot had departed, the Lord said to Abram, now lift up your eyes from the place where you are and look to the north and the south and the east and the west. For all the land you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if one could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Get up and walk around the land through its length and breadth, and I will give it to you. So Abram moved his tent and went to live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord.
He builds altars to the Lord when he settles in. This is a habit with him. We see it over and over again, and it's the first thing he does. This idea of his offspring being a multitude, at this point, he has no offspring. And it's going to become a big part of the story. I want to skip ahead, but Mary will do this thing she does, and I'll have elbow marks on me. I'm not skipping ahead. But the idea that he gets a promise, your offspring will be multitude in this land. And so he tells him, go do a walkabout. Go have a look around. You need to
And this is the second time he will reconfirm this promise to Abram many times, and this is the second time he reaffirmed it.
That's right.
Reconfirmed it. I'm going to make you read Genesis 14, 1 through 12, because
Okay.
there's a whole bunch of names in it.
Before we go, Scott, what is the line 10, that parenthesis, this is before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Is that in the original? Is that
It
somebody's
is in
comment?
fact there, and you know, did it get inserted later? Well, it was. This wasn't written as it happened. Somebody wrote it later on. But what that line says is, Lot goes to settle in the area that is we know as Sodom and Gomorrah because it was lush and fertile. It wasn't after the destruction, and so this is an explanation. How could Lot have gone and settled in a fertile land? We know that area, and it's a wasteland. And what this says is it wasn't a wasteland before. And there are places that we know. I'm not even going to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, but there are other places like you hear about the cedars of Lebanon that used to be lush forest, and they went in and cut them all down, and they become desert. So, I mean, this stuff happens, but this is talking specifically, it wasn't lush after it was destroyed. Okay?
Yeah, it is for me. Thank you. But there's also the idea here that the Lord is working on a whole different plan than we are today. We want to know where does God get the legal authority, quote unquote, to give somebody else's land away? And that's telling us something else, by the way.
We tend to say things like it's not fair, and look at things. You're right. What does God get off saying this is going to become your land? I'm not going to wrestle with that today. It's a subject for another time. But it is a big source of contention as you know, people read the Bible, as people object to the Bible. Let's go to 14. In those days, Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and Tidal, the king of Goyim, went to war against Berah, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shina, king of Admah, Shemabar, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. That's a lot of names and a whole lot of words. The thing is, there are 5 kings from up sort of north that come swooping into the area. And I guess I should go ahead and read. I'll come back to this. But 4 kings come in and wind up going to war with 5 kings who live there. So it's 4 against 5. When I was in college, one of the professors talked about back when there were 13 colonies, they took a vote and the score came out 6-7 and the side was 6-1. And he said, how can 6 out of 13 be a majority? And I knew what he was getting at. It's the wrong 7. They don't have the power. The 6 had more power. So even though you vote, they win. My vote counts twice. These 4 who come in are powerful. And now we'll read the rest of it. The latter 5 came as allies to the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea, that is the Dead Sea. For 12 years, they had been subject to Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year, they rebelled. The area where Lot has settled was subject to one of these kings. That's what that just said. He had come in and conquered them, and they paid tribute. And in the 13th year, they said, hey, we think we're strong enough now. We're going to quit paying him. So keep that in mind. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings allied with him went out and defeated the Rephaites, the Ashtaroth, the Rephaites in Ashtaroth Karmaim, the Zuzites in Ham. You remember Ham was one of the sons of Noah. The Emites in, and I'm not even doing that one, and the Horites in the area of Mount Seir. So you know, I mean, there's a lot of names, but at the time there were people that would recognize this. Then they turned back to invade in Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they conquered the whole territory of the Amalekites, as well as the Amorites who lived in Hazan Tamar. Now, we hear these names, Amalekites, and you know, I mean, a lot of these keep coming up. These four kings come in and swoop into the area and just conquer a whole lot of people. And the idea is when you conquer them, you take their stuff. I mean, you get rich. And then you leave behind instructions that every year you're going to give me a tenth. That 1/10 is very common, the tithe. That's your tribute to me so that I don't come back in and do this again. And I'm leaving you alive. I'm leaving you alive. You're going to pay me the 10th in exchange for me not just killing all of you. So they conquer all these people, but then after that, the king of they turn back to invade this other place. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zehoim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, marched out and arrayed themselves for battle in the valley of Siddim against the other four. So here's the thing. This Kedorlaomer, and that name, by the way, has a meaning. An omer is a measure of grain, and his name means handful of sheaves. So he's named himself a name that means he's very rich. He has lots of grain. This is because he's conquered everything. The people down in Sodom and Gomorrah, I showed you down at the bottom of the Dead Sea, are subject to him, and they've quit paying tribute. And I'm convinced that the whole purpose in this trip was to come down and put them back in line. But on the way, they conquer all these other people. I mean, this is a looting mission. And they get down to the bottom of the Dead Sea, to Siddim, and there are 4 kings and 5 kings ride out against them. And they array themselves for battle. And Lot is a part of that. Lot is in this area of Sodom. And so he winds up when you move into the place and they let you stay there, when it comes time to raise an army, you take part. Lot's a part of this battle.
Now the valley of Siddim was full of tar pits, and as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some men fell into the pits, but the survivors fled to the hill country. The 4 kings seized all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food, and they went on their way. They also carried off Abram's nephew Lot and his possessions, since Lot was living in Sodom.
Let's stop there. So it says that 5 kings rode out against 4. You got a picture, and the next thing you know, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah are fleeing. They just get routed. I mean, they run off in disarray and head for the hills. When an army retreats in disarray, it's a wipeout. And that's what happens. But some of them, including the kings, survive. It talks about tar pits on the way, and some of them in their headlong rush get hung up in those. But the Sodom and Gomorrah, the 5 kings get wiped out, and their kings head for the hills. And so these 4 other kings, the ones who have come in, they just take all their stuff. When you run an army, you need supplies. You need food. You've got a supply chain, right? Well, that's beautiful. When you run away, you leave all that behind. And they take weapons off the dead people. They take whatever they can get their hands on, they take it. But notice they also take Lot and his people. Remember how wealth is calculated? In livestock and in people. And they take Lot and his people to be slaves. They're hauling them back up where they came from. Lot manages to survive, and it seems to me that Lot didn't run away, but he gets captured. He has no choice but surrender, and him and his household are heading back up.
Then an escapee came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. Now Abram was living near the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, a brother of Eshcol and Aner, all of whom were bound by treaty to Abram. And when Abram heard that his relative had been captured, he mobilized the 318 trained men born in his household, and they set out in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night, Abram divided his forces and routed
Chedorlaomer.
army, pursuing them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. He retrieved all the goods, as well as his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the rest of the people.
So somebody escaped this big battle, and they know about Abram being the relative, and they go and tell him, hey, your nephew has been hauled off. Your nephew's been taken captive. And in Hebrew, in the early Hebrew, where instead of the alphabet they have now, their symbols, the symbol for a brother, I mentioned this before, there's an ox, which is strength, and there's another symbol that is a wall. A brother is a strong wall. Brothers defend brothers. They become a wall of defense. Abram hears and immediately is going to ride to his nephew, but he's treated as a brother, ride to his rescue. And you notice it mentions a couple of other people. It says they're bound to Abraham by a treaty. That word is the same word as covenant. Every time we see covenant, it is this word. They've made a covenant with Abraham, right? And Abraham is, I think he's the big guy on the block. He's the alpha, and they recognize safety, and they make a covenant with him. So when it's time to ride out, there's an inference that they go out with him. Abraham takes the 318, is it 318? The men of his household, which is a pretty good size household, and he takes them out, and he rides and finds the guy who's got Lot, and at night they go in and wipe the guy out. And you notice it says that they pursued them all the way to Damascus. That's Syria. That's all the way up above, just above the Galilee. Remember that map I showed you? So this is another headlong flight. And along the way, they leave their stuff. They leave everything that they looted from Sodom and Gomorrah. And the people, following Abraham, take all the stuff back, and they rescue Lot and his household. And that's what a strong wall is. That's what a brother does. And that, by the way, is part of why people value the lineage so much, because it's survival in a really harsh world at times. If you have a big family, if you have a strong wall, you survive.
After Abram returned from defeating
Chedorlaomer
and the king allied with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, since he was the priest of God Most High. And he blessed Abram and said, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." Then Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people, but take the goods for yourself." But Abram replied to the king of Sodom, "I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not accept even a thread or a strap of a sandal or anything that belongs to you, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten, and the share for the men who went with me, Aner, Ashol, and Mabre. They may take their portion."
There's a lot going on here. This is one of those times that and we don't have time. This is going to have to, part of this has to wait for next week, because this is one of those big, amazing things that you flash forward into the New Testament becomes important. But let me tell you about this part. Abram returns from routing this king and taking all the stuff. and the king of Sodom who fled into the hills, remember? Well, now that the guy's been defeated, he comes down from the hills. He's heard what's going on, and he meets Abram out on this plain, out on the west side of the Dead Sea. And he says, "Oh, hey, I was just looking for you, Abram. Good for you. And I've got some bread here." And he tells him, "Look, I know you just routed this guy and you took back all of the stuff. Just let me have my people back, and you keep all of our stuff. I know we're penniless. I know we won't have anything to eat, but that's okay. You earned it. Just give me the people." There is negotiating going on here. And Abram's response is, "I'm not taking a dime. I'm not going to give you the opportunity to say you made Abram rich. God has made him rich." And he says, "I don't want anything from you. You take all your stuff. My men have eaten some of the food. I can't help that, but I'm not taking a penny. I'm not taking anything." You remember the guys who were bound by covenant, by treaty? He says, "Let them take a share. I'm not taking anything. I didn't do this for the stuff. I didn't do it for you. I did it to rescue my people." And so, this is also a sign of who Abram is. This is also part of why he's chosen for the role that he plays. He exhibits characteristics that you should note about who he is. But then here's this weird reference. While they're out on the plain, while this is going on, this guy comes out. His name is Melchizedek. We see that name again in the New Testament, and it's going to take a little time. But Melchizedek comes out, and it says that, and first of all, Melchizedek means king of righteousness. The word for king, and all of a sudden here I'm drawing a blank because I was reading something else, but the first part is king, and tzedek is righteousness. It also says that he's the king of Salem. Now, Salem is shalom, it is peace, but the city that is Jerusalem is Jeru, which is city, and Salem, which is peace. He is the king of peace. Strangely, we later see Jesus referred to as the Prince of Peace, right? You notice that it says Melchizedek is the priest of God Most High. Now, later under the law, the only people who can be priests are descendants of Levi, one of the tribes, yes? But what this shows is there were priests. There's an actual priest of Yahweh long before Levi was even born. Melchizedek is the priest of God Most High before the Levites even exist. And it says in the New Testament, Levi is still in his mother's womb. I mean, he's not born. This guy comes who rules in this area. And if you look at the map, it's perfect for where Jerusalem winds up being. And he is the king of Salem, and he blesses Abraham. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, Melech HaOlam, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. This Melchizedek comes out blessing Abram and using the authority of God Most High. He is a priest of Yahweh before Levites. It becomes a big deal later on. And you notice the last thing about this part is Abram gives Melchizedek a tenth of everything. He gives him a tithe. Now, when someone conquers you, the tribute, this tenth is fairly common as the price they exact, because you can withstand losing, a tenth of your stuff and get used to it. later on, the people of Israel are told to give a tenth to what becomes the temple, but it's because the Levites, the priests, didn't get a share of the inheritance. They become the priests, and the other tribes support them by giving a tenth of their produce. Abraham gives a tenth to Melchizedek, the priest of God Most High. This is a weird thing to just toss into the middle of this encounter. I mean, it's just bizarre. But next week, when we have time,
You don't want me to read Hebrew?
yeah, no, let's not, because
Okay.
I don't think we can do it justice.
Okay.
Next week, we're going to talk about this, and you're going to see that Melchizedek and who he is becomes very important all the way in the New Testament. There is a long plan going here. And if you, instead of just, you get bogged down in names, and it's mind Novocaine, and we lose the story. If you see what's going on and you see what it puts into motion, there's a long plan. It's amazing. And the plan, as I said, doesn't stop. It extends to us. That's important to note. Anything else?
No.
No, don't read that because there's not time. You're like, it's 10 o'clock, you'll be punching me and I don't want to get punched.
Okay.
John, we struggle to see enough, to understand enough. And we understand that these things are not hidden, but they take work. The clues, the trail is left here for us to follow. And when we do, we see your hand and a plan that has been in place from the very beginning. We're thankful for that. The thing I would ask today is that you use those words to open our eyes, to make us see the plan you have, and that we're a part of it, and not just some people who died thousands of years ago, that you did this for a purpose, and that we're a part of that purpose. Show us your ways. They're not our ways, but we work towards that. Amen. Amen. That's it.
Thank you, guys. Yes, and come back and hear about Melchizedek next week because he's pretty amazing.
And you did
Anything else?
fall to your right. Oh, can I say one thing? Is Cindy still here?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes,
Mary gets back to the airport and she doesn't have a phone, remember? She doesn't have a phone.
yes.
How do I, from the cell phone parking lot, know when Mary, because she had to check bags?
Oh, my goodness.
How do I know when to pick Mary up? And I don't. So I have to circle around. And Mary is out looking for me at the airport. And she sees one truck and another, because there's a lot of trucks in Texas, if you haven't noticed. And then she sees one that has two elves on the grill in front. Says, I know that's Scott's truck. Now, I don't officially know how those got there, but I thought I would tell you the story.
Elves go where elves want to go.
You guys have a great week. Thanks.
Love
Have a great
y'all.
week. Bye.